Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lords of Infinity. So, it has been quite some time since we last played this, but now we have the full game. I did not have any clue when the actual game was going to come out. It's funny because I'm actually subscribed to the Patreon, but I saw that there were like a lot of different reports, and I usually don't pay them any attention because I just want a announcement of the actual game. And then someone alerted me on YouTube that the game was coming out in like 15 hours. And it was just like, oh, okay, cool. But I think the game came out last Thursday, maybe Wednesday. Not really sure. I was tied up in work. I had planned on releasing one sometime last week, and I was planning on releasing one yesterday, but I didn't get a chance to. But here I am now, and we will cover this now. So I have played the game since it actually came out. I did buy it as soon as it came out. But when I say I played it, I wasn't actually paying attention to what was going on. I just wanted to see how far the game actually got compared to the demo. The demo, I don't remember exactly where we stopped. I haven't actually went back to look at my old videos and see how far we got. I think we made it all the way up to the brigands attacking, and I think things may have went sideways after that. Not really 100% sure, but yeah, it there was a lot that happened. I did play the actual demo in my own spare time, and I got all the way to the end of the demo, and I was pretty surprised at how far the demo got into the game compared to the actual game. I won't spoil any of that, but you'll see when we get there. I will just go ahead and do a full playthrough this time because, if I'm not mistaken, I did not play staying in the capital as opposed to staying at home the last time around. So this time we will be staying in the capital. We'll try and get into politics. I am worried though because I don't have a very high charisma. My intellect is quite high, but my charisma is on par with my soldiering, and yeah, it's not great. It is not great at all, and I've got a funny feeling that I am going to need that in abundance. But we'll see how it goes. And another thing too, the other reason why I don't want to jump into being back at home is because I did play the estate management aspect, and I played with a modded save too, and it was not great. It was not the best thing in the world. It was quite difficult. It was difficult the last time I turned around and played it. I did not expect it to be that difficult with a modded save though. So I think there needs to be some balancing issues as far as how often certain projects can be done and things like that. So yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, I think that might have been the gripe that I had initially about the estate management aspects and so on and so forth. But yeah, it's a thing. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see how being in the capital goes this time around. And I guess we'll jump into it. I'm not going to change anything. I'm fine with the names and so on and so forth. As far as the known friends and associates, we'll just kind of have to pick it up as we go. Yeah, so let's jump into it. I did not want to change my name, so we'll just keep that the same. Not Darian, Darren. All right. And we shall proceed. I think in my one that I used in my spare time, I changed it to the Darren, the Baron of Bremen. So I'm not going to change to that this time. We're going to keep Rumberg, and we shall go ahead and proceed. We are in the prologue now, wherein the cavalry officer, newly returned from the war in Antar, takes up his seat as a lord of the Tierran courts. So, also another slight thing too, if I sound a little bit off, I have a new microphone. I'm probably going to be adjusting it here to see if it kind of acts right. I have to download some plugins and stuff like that though, and it's going to take a while for that to kind of adjust. I'm still trying to figure out how to use the thing. But yeah, if you hear any differences in my voice and things like that, it's probably the reason why I'm also slightly sick too, so that's a problem. But yeah, just wanted to kind of point that out. Anywho, to the actual story. Lord Darren de Aldricombe, heir to the barony of Rumberg, presents himself before the king's majesty. You step forward as the herald's booming announcement echoes off the stone walls of the court's chamber. Your soon-to-be peers fall upon you from all directions, the heat of their attention boring through the thick fur mantle on your shoulders. everything chafes, everything itches. Which, with each step, you deplore the encumbrance of your robes even more, even as you long for the absent weight of your saber and pistols. Yet you keep steady, eyes front, shoulders back. You force yourself to walk as if the eyes of the king himself are upon you, because they are. There he is, at the far end of the chamber, a thin, auburn haired figure wrapped in the mass of his court robes. His eyes are weary, his face is old for a man not yet 30, lined prematurely by the stresses of war and rule. Still, he sits proud atop the throne his ancestors had carved from stone and steel and dark Butian wood, tired eyes following as you approach. 1 second. Let me adjust this just slightly. All right, I'm back. It's amazing just how shit my eyesight has become. Anyway, the etiquette for approaching a king of Tierra was drilled into you as a child, and through the long years of turmoil in between, your father's voice reaches out to you and guides your limbs. Stop precisely 12 paces before the dais. Bow. 3 paces forward. Bow again. 3 more. Kneel. And await the king's reply. But it's not the king who moves first. Instead, a dour-faced man in the uniform of a lieutenant colonel of the Grenadiers stepped out from the shadow of the throne. In his hands, he carries a gigantic 2-handed sword, larger even than those used by the Knights of the Red, its blade flickering with the faint tracery of bane-runed steel. You've seen this sword before, though only in engravings and paintings. Pact Maker, the Tierran sword of state. From the corner of your eye, the grenadier fixes you with a hard look as he sets the sword before his king. You and Lieutenant Colonel Lefay have a history, and it is not an altogether pleasant one. He still owes you a great number of explanations, but now is not the time. That is not what you're here for. I remember him. I think I called him Leaf before because I couldn't pronounce his name. The grenadier steps back. The king rises, taking up the sword with which Edwin the Strong wrought the unified kingdoms more than a century ago. With solemn, practiced grace, he moves forward. In the silence, even his soft footfalls upon the rich carpet seem to echo. He stops little more than an arm length away, and with a strong, clear voice, he utters the words which he must have by now said 100 times before. I, Miguel of the House of Rindaware, Duke of Vitoria and King of Tierra, do confirm before those assembled here the rights of Lord Darren of the House of Dracon to the barony of Rumberg. I hereby pledge all my power to the preservation of his freedoms, his properties, and his titles. I swear to accept his counsel in the governance of the realm. I swear to be his champion in peace and his brother in war. This I swear on behalf of myself and the rightful heirs of my bloodline. This I swear by the saints and my sacred honor. Slowly, carefully, he turns the pack maker in his hands, reversing the blade until its hilt hovers just a hand's breadth from your face. Upon this oath, swear your loyalty to me, he continues, with all the ominous ceremony the occasion deserves. Or with his blade, strike me down. Your fingers reach out, brushing the silver inlay of Packmaker's pommel. I, Darren of the House of Dracon, do hereby swear fealty to Miguel of the House of Rindaware, and acknowledge him as my liege and rightful king of Tierra. The oft-rehearsed words come to you readily, flowing from your lips as easily as breath. I hereby pledge all of my power to the defense of his realm, to the enforcement of his laws, and to the protection of his honor. I swear to offer him wise counsel in the governance of the realm. I swear to be his brother in peace and his champion in war. This I swear to him, and to all the rightful heirs of his bloodline. This I swear before all assembled here, and with his life in my hands. This I swear, by the saints and my sacred honor. Packmaker draws away as your voice echoes against the stone. The king steps back. Then by my right as sovereign and the authority vested in me by this court, I name you Baron of Rumberg, as your father was before you. he declares, loud enough for all to hear. Rise, Lord Rumberg, and take your rightful place among your peers. And I got an achievement. Lord of the Courts. You rise to a round of polite but enthusiastic applause. Some nod approvingly from the high galleries. Your service in Antar made you a name among the officers of the king's army, but it's a surprise to see something of the luster of your exploits reach even to the very court's chamber. They're still clapping as you ascend the steps to the benches and take your place among the lords of the courts. Are you not going to go away? You look for the banners of the Salt Coast lords, of Leon's court, and Castermain, and Crittenden. When you find them, you move to join the assembly of hard-faced men sitting in their shadow. Some offer to shake your hand as you take your place. Others make space on the benches and motion for you to sit down. You take your seat just in time for the king to lay Packmaker across his lap. The booming voice of the sergeant-at-arms echoes across the stone, calling the chamber to order. At last, the business of governance begins. Quorum is obtained. Grievances are aired. The issues facing the chamber at first are minor ones. The placement of a fence, the ownership of a road, petty squabbles made significant only by the noble blood of those entangled in them. Yet even so, you pay close attention to the proceedings, even as some of the lords around you seem to nod off or pursue their own conversations with the neighbors. You note carefully how a lord of the courts must present a motion before the chamber, how he must never address another member by name, only by title, how he must ask the king's permission to speak, and how the king, bound by the strictures of his own office, cannot but give it. In truth, the complicated procedure of the courts makes far more interesting watching than the debates themselves. When you imagine what it would be like to sit upon the body which governed the unified kingdom, you thought of great and eloquent statesmen delivering thundering condemnations of evil and high-minded appeals to goodness and virtue. The courts were supposed to be the refuge of the best of men, doing their utmost to ensure the prosperity of the realm and the security of its people. Instead, you find men no better than you in an atmosphere more like a fish market or a cafe than a solemn chamber of state. It is then, as you begin to come to terms with the reality of your new peers, that the burble of conversation suddenly halts. The chamber falls silent as a youngish, broad-shouldered man in a fashionably cut frock coat steps out from under the section of benches just to the left of the throne. He proceeds down the aisle as those still standing take their seats. With the requisite bow, he turns to the throne. Your Majesty, His Grace, the Duke of Wolfram, requests permission to address the chamber. That should be great. So this is young Wolfram, the son of the man who died at Blogia. This man who, by all accounts, has become one of the most powerful and controversial voices in the courts. This, at least, will be worth paying attention to. The king nods his assent. Wolfram turns to face the whole chamber, his voice a low tenor with the gravitas of a practiced orator. One would like to open on a note of thanksgiving, for there are those in this chamber to whom much is owed. In the long years in which this realm has been at war, it has become easy to forget the truly extraordinary scale of the exertions of those who have taken up arms in defense of crown and kingdom. When war becomes commonplace, it cheapens even the most brilliant acts of courage in the eyes of those who do not live the terror of battle for themselves. When the men who perform such acts are forgotten, then we are all cheapened. He turns as he speaks, chest out, shoulders back, his voice broadcasting itself like a farmer with a handful of seed. Thus, let us not forget that there are those in this very chamber who have performed prodigious in the face of the king's enemies, those who have endured cold and death to be restored to us once more. Let us recognize Viscount Palliser, whose charge broke Corroborate's army. Let us recognize the Dukes of Havenport and Canaris, who cannot be here with us on this day. Let us recognize the Viscount Ware, the Earl of Castermain, and Baron Matheson. Let us recognize the newest addition to this chamber, the gallant Baron Rumberg, whose dragoons helped save the army at Blogia. Let us recognize them all, and all of those who have fallen on foreign shores, lest we forget the sacrifices they made. A fresh wave of applause washes over the chamber. You see Palliser, made a viscount for his role at the Second Battle of Caringia, inclined his head in appreciation. Castermain seems to turn an even deeper shade of red than normal. Such compliments will mean little to the dead. I wonder what Wolfram is getting at, opening his address like this. I mean, I'm an idealist, but I know he's up to something. There's some hidden purpose to Wolfram's word, though you aren't quite sure as to what. What's certain is that he didn't bring the courts to a standstill for the sake of a few lines of poetic flattery. The only question is to where he means his speech to lead. He doesn't wait long in providing you with an answer. But now our realm is restored to peace, Wolfram continues once the applause fades enough for him to be heard. Would it not be only just and fitting for our soldiers and sailors to return to their interrupted lives and enjoy the prosperity and tranquility for which they have fought and bled for? There's a murmur of approval, not just from Wolframite benches, but from all around the chamber. The Duke nods with them. Yet instead, they return to find the kingdom on the brink of ruin. They find the shops of their fathers bankrupt, the shawls of their mothers threadbare, and the bellies of their children empty. Wolfram's voice grows in pitch, even as the murmurs of agreement swell. The good people of this realm have been driven to destitution by the taxes which the Exchequer has levied these past 10 years. Taxes which impoverishes our tenants and drive honest men to brigandage for want of food. Taxes which have strangled our market towns and trading houses. Taxes contrived to pay for a war which is now over. The murmurs have become a dull roar. Many cheer and brandish their rolled up papers in approval. The king sits stone-faced. Wolfram may not have called out the man upon the throne by name, but he didn't have to. It was the king's decision to retaliate so boldly against Antar's declaration of war. It was the king's decision to fight that war to the finish, and to pay for it with emergency levies and foreign loans when the kingdom's treasury ran empty. You all know whom Wolfram means to blame. For the sake of our much-abused commons, I call upon His Majesty's government to repeal these taxes. The Duke continues, all but shouting over the roar of voices. I call upon the Exchequer to disband our superfluous army, drawn down our oversized fleets, and deliver us a budget which does not rely upon the impoverishment of our people to keep this kingdom from bankruptcy. And if the right honorable Chancellor of the Exchequer cannot do this most elementary thing, then I call upon His Majesty to find someone who can. The chamber explodes in a renewed rush of voices, cries of approval warring with roaring, indignant shouts of shame, shame. The king looks on, his hand white-knuckled around Packmaker's hilt. Not far away, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Earl of Wethern, sits in tight-lipped fury. You recognize some of the men shouting their disapproval the loudest, men you served with in Antar, some even in their regimental uniforms. Perhaps you ought to join them. Even if everything Wolfram said is true, Tierra is in need of strong defenses more than ever. Victory over Antar has made Tierra a potential great power, and a target for those in Kien or Takar who may see it as a threat to the primacy of their own countries. The unified kingdom cannot afford to be defenseless. And yet, if everything Wolfram said is true, then Tierra's survival might depend just as much upon an immediate end to wartime taxation. How could the people be depended upon to defend a government which has done nothing but impoverish them? What purpose would it serve to commission warships and cannon if nobody is willing to man them? I'm going to go with, to be honest, I am of two minds regarding the matter, because that's typically how I am most of the time. There's reason to Wolfram's points, but perhaps those who oppose him aren't so wrong in believing that he goes too far. Perhaps there's some middle ground to be trod, some compromise amenable to all parties. Or perhaps you're merely ignorant of the realities outside the court's chamber. You who have been in Etoria only a few weeks, and who had been in distant Antar for years beforehand. If you are to take a side, then you shall have to do so based upon knowledge which you do not yet possess. Perhaps once you've seen the country for yourself, examine the veracity of the Duke of Wolfram's rhetoric, then you'll be able to decide for yourself. Until then, you remain silent and allow yourself to be drowned out by the voices of other men. The debate goes on. Other men answer Wolfram's address, only to be answered in return, stroke and counterstroke, each compelling the other like a pair of fixed gear wheels, turning and going nowhere. An hour passes, then two. Argument and rebuttal subside until the indistinct buzzing of voices. Those around you droop in their seats. Some doze off entirely. You're not sure you can blame them. No resolutions are passed, no motions are carried, no votes are called. The chamber does not progress, it dances. In the end, the session is adjourned, more out of sheer exhaustion than any sort of accomplishment. It's a relief to stand up again and stretch your limbs. It's all you can do to avoid a most indecorous sigh of relief when your backbone realigns itself betwixt your shoulders. Still in your robes, you join the throng of your fellow lords as they file out the doors leading to the antechamber and beyond, to the Lord's course. Yet not long after you pass the pair of grenadiers at the antechamber doors, you find yourself approached by a slim, elegant figure. His resplendent white and sky blue lancer uniform setting him apart from the mass of somber black frock coats. Lord Runeberg, he exclaims in a clipped, dandyish accent. Fine things to see you here. Good to be finally back from Antar, eh? Sir Louis Auguste, the All-Palliser, led the cavalry brigade at the decisive Second Battle of Caringia. For his vital role in the victory, the king made him Viscount Palliser, a victory title with no estates but the right to sit on the courts. He offers you his hand. My best wishes on your investiture and first day in the chamber, Lord Runeberg. Suppose it gives you something to do, now that you're on half pay and all, what? I don't know what type of accent that is, but okay. Perhaps, but first I must put my estates to right. Nah, in truth, I missed the army already. You're not the only one, I can tell you that, Palliser admits. I've got a townhouse off St. Octavius Park, holding a dinner there tonight, informal thing, no ladies, all old Antar men, like ourselves. Be honored if you'd come. Lord Marcus will be there. 2 half-paid captains from your regiment, too. Blaylock and Sanderal. They were yours, weren't they? You give it a thought. The promise of familiar faces and familiar subjects is a tempting one. The war was not all trumpets and glory, but some part of you still misses it. You must admit, the chance to talk about it with old comrades and acquaintances is... I beg your pardon. I pray I'm not interrupting. You turn to the source of this new voice, somewhat annoyed at having your thoughts so suddenly interrupted. That's when you find yourself face to face with the Duke of Wolfram. Lord Palliser inclines his head ever so slightly. Not at all, your grace. I assure you, I shan't detain you for long, Wolfram says genially. I merely wish to offer my congratulations to the newest lord of the courts. He turns to you. Welcome, Lord Runeberg. The chamber is made better for having one in it. You say the only thing one can say when complimented by a duke of the unified kingdom. Thank you, your grace. I've also come to offer an invitation, Wolfram continues. I have a dinner engagement at the Rindoware Club this evening. I'd be quite pleased if you could join us. An invitation for dinner with the Duke of Wolfram at his private club. That would certainly be an honor. But what of Palliser's own invitation? What of old comrades in the Brotherhood of War? One cannot very well be in 2 places at once. And besides, what reason would Wolfram have to invite you to such a thing? You haven't even spoken in the chamber. What reason could he have to offer you an invitation? I guess I could ask about it, but I'm not going to. I almost kind of want to say I'm not sure what I've done to deserve such an honor. Sure, let's go with that. I like to know where men stand on things, what they believe, Wolfram replies. I discussed much the same with Lord Palisar last month, when he was made Viscount of Caringia. Palisar shifts a little as a slight look of unease passes over his features. Is that not what the chamber is for, you ask? To voice one's beliefs. What is said in the chamber and what is believed by the speaker is not always the same thing, Wolfram replies. To speak one's belief before the courts is to put on an act. One stands before 100 men, all looking for an excuse to shout one down, knowing that every word may earn one an enemy or lose one a friend. Yet, if one is a lord of the courts, one is also, in a sense, my brother. Even if we disagree, I would not wish to mischaracterize a brother's belief based on words which may be distorted by duress or rhetoric or the ill intentions of interpreters. Come to the Rindelware with me, and you will have every opportunity to explain your thoughts without such vexations. My apologies, Your Grace, but I am already spoken for this evening. Wolfram seems genuinely disappointed. Well, that is a pity. Perhaps some other time then? He leaves you with one final nod. Once again, congratulations. I give you joy of the evening, my lords. Palisar turns to you as Wolfram departs. I assume that means it'll be dinner with us then, eh? You may assume so, you reply. The Lancer breaks out into a wide grin. Very fine, very fine. I'll send my coach about 8 o'clock. It should still be light out. I shall see you then. Oh yes, and one last thing. Yes? Come in uniform. You feel a sense of almost profound relief when you're finally able to strip off your heavy investment robes, along with divesting yourself of the unfamiliar and constricting knee breeches and court shoes of civilian life, to be replaced with the comforting feeling of uniform trousers and high riding boots. Palisar's coach arrives at 8 o'clock on the minute, and his coachman ushers you in with a proud, swaggering precision. You do not need to ask to know that the man is likely one of Palisar's old sergeants. No sooner are you seated does the carriage lurch into motion. Before long, the narrow streets widen out into open, pleasant boulevards. St. Octavius Park is one of the most fashionable neighborhoods in the city for a reason. Yet even here, you can see gaunt figures huddled in the street corners, hands held out in supplication. Victoria has always had beggars, but to see them here, in the shadow of the magnificent homes of the wealthy and stylish, is something of a shock. Even more so when you notice that some of the most wretched-looking vagrants wear not the tattered broadcloth of the lowest classes, but the remains of frock coats and the laddered ruins of silk stockings. These had been men of substance once. The sight weighs on you as your coach rattles on into the setting sun. Is this what 12 years of war has brought the unified kingdom to? Beggars in the wealthiest part of its richest city. You push the thought out of your mind. There will be time for such thoughts later. Viscount Palisar's townhouse happens to be an imposing limestone affair, decorated with the great crossbeams and stone railings of the latest Chian style. Palisar's title might not have brought any estates with him, but the man must certainly have some other great means of income if he can afford a place like this. You arrive dressed in the gray, green, and red of your dragoon dress tunic, the bulk of your plumed helmet under one arm balancing out the familiar weight of the saber on your hilt. You step through the light of the street lamps, trying not to seem too perturbed by them. Neither the lights nor the wrought iron poles holding them high above the street where there were there the last time you were in Notoria. Now they're a common sight in the capital's more affluent neighborhoods, filling the streets with the light of coal oil flames even in the darkest hours of the night. A livered footman ushers you indoors, and you step into a kaleidoscope of color and martial glitter. From a high gallery, a string quartet plays familiar marching music, their airs adapted from fife and drum to the hoken and violoncello The hall is filled with uniforms. The orange of the line infantry is everywhere. The sky blue and white of the lancers clusters around Lord Palisar's genial figure. The dark blue of the navy is here too, though only a few. There are even men in the familiar gray, green, and red and your own regiment, two of them standing by the staircase. One calm and subdued, watching the animated gestures of his companion with a combination of amusement and slight embarrassment. You recognize them, of course. Blaylock and Sandoval were lieutenants under your command in Antar. They'd bought their way to captain by the time the war was over, but with the regiment returning to peacetime strength, they must have been deemed surplus to requirements as you were and placed on half pay. There's the party-colored profusion of Kintari Highlander's cloak, not the ragged and muddy quilt of scraps actually worn into battle, but a fine garment of silk and velvet, made in the bright colors of Clan Havenport. The man wearing it is a familiar face too, Lord Marcus de All Havenport, the Duke of Havenport's younger brother, a man whom you knew as a fine leader of men and a trusted friend. He nurses a glass of something clear and a glass tumbler, looking as out of place as when you first met him. A 21-year-old lieutenant colonel, quietly terrified of the responsibility his birth has foisted upon him. And perhaps strangest of all, there's a tall, inhumanly pale figure in the deep blue dress uniform of an officer of the Takaran Reichshire. Lord Cassius Vamholt, ambassador to Tierra, a jovial fellow, young by the standards of his race, and still full of a boyish exuberance, which you often found rather endearing. What he's doing here in a reception of the veterans of a Tierran war is beyond you. So let's talk to the Takaran ambassador, shall we? Lord Cassius Vamholt is pouring himself a fresh sniffer of brandy when you catch him. Judging by the color in his cheeks, it is not his first. Ah, Dracone, he exclaims with his customary joviality. No, that's not quite right. I'm told that you have been subject to some ritual and that you are to be spoken of as Rumberg. Is that correct? That's correct, you reply. As a lord of the courts, I'm supposed to be known as Lord Rumberg now. The Takaran blinks for a moment, nonplussed. And I am to call you my lord, like a servant. He shakes his head. No, I fear that is a bit too much, he remarks ruefully. You are a dear friend to me. I hope you understand that. But no Takaran could possibly be expected to debase themselves to a human in such a way. Others may call you what they like, but you're still just Draken to me, yes? To be frank, I find the new style rather tedious myself. Yes, I rather thought you would, Lord Cassius replies easily. You've never been one for pointless ritual. I suppose that's almost Takaran of you. Some part of you would rather like to point out that a ritual's foreignness does not necessarily make it pointless, and that were you in Versovia, in the heart of the Takaran Empire, you would find their customs no doubt just as incomprehensible and opaque. Of course, it would be far from politic for you to say so. To tell the ambassador of one of the greatest powers of the Infinite Sea how little you are likely to think of his cherished rituals and customs seems a prescription for unpleasantness, not to mention the height of bad manners, even though you are someone he would no doubt consider a friend. If Lord Cassius has caught on to your train of thought, he does not seem to pay it any mind. Anyway, he continues, I suppose you've come here for a reason, yes? What exactly are you doing here? Having a drink, clearly, Lord Cassius replies, deadpan as he takes a pull from his brandy. Rather obvious, I would think. No, I mean, what are you doing here? You repeat, not entirely unamused by the Takaran's evasive answer. Lord Cassius shrugs. This is a reception for veterans of the war in Antar, is it not? He asks rhetorically. Was I not in Antar? Did I not, what is that charming expression you people have? Dance the powder dance? Surely, if you qualify to be here, then I must as well. Then you were invited, you ask. Lord Cassius might have been in Antar, but he didn't exactly serve in the king's army. He was there in a strictly diplomatic capacity, even if his enthusiasm occasionally made him overstep his bounds. Invited? The Karen scoffs. Of course not. I'm a free citizen of the Ultrix Vom Takara. I may go where I please. I had a free evening. Your palisar had a good cellar. Why not? Certainly nobody has objected, least of all our gracious host. Indeed, how could anyone object? To eject the ambassador from one of the great powers to eject the ambassador from one of the great powers from a formal event would have been the height of incivility. Never mind grounds for a diplomatic incident which a unified kingdom could ill afford. In any case, Lord Cassius seems to pay the matter little heed. Surely there are more interesting things to talk about. How have you been since we last met? Not long after your army beat Prince Corbett at Caringia, my superiors ordered me to Atoria. Lord Cassius replies, I've been here for the past 2 years, establishing a permanent embassy. You were not part of the negotiations ending the war? You ask. The Takarans had mediated the peace talks between the king and the League Congress. It seems strange to you that they would not maintain their ambassador to Tiara as a member of the commission involved. Evidently, my superiors in the ministry did not believe that I possessed the necessary temperament to be present at such an important juncture, Lord Cassius replies, voice taut. I should have expected as much. My posting as ambassador was never about Takara's interests, was it? You nod. The Takaran has spoken of this matter to you before, of how his father, a senior minister within the Takaran government, had him assigned ambassador to Tiara, more to teach his libertine son self-discipline than to serve any interests of the Aldkizern's government. But now all in the embassy is working as it should, Lord Cassius concludes, and as if I'm finding myself more free time than I could ever want, here I am. How do you find Atoria? It is strange, Lord Cassius admits. At times, especially in the areas around the embassy, it can seem much like Varsovia or Konoji Zir Rosh or some other Takaran city. Edmund II rebuilt much of the city in the Takaran style, you point out. Perhaps that is why you find it so familiar. The Takaran shakes his head. The illusion only lasts a moment. The people here are different. Everything is smelly, everything is a little too cramped, and to be honest, I'm not quite used to the sight of everyone on the street trying to sell me something, he shrugs. I suppose that sort of petty avarice is part of the Tiaran character. You mislike it? You ask. In truth, I'm more bored than anything else, Lord Cassius admits. It is no fault of yours, I assure you. Atori's amusements are not to your taste, you ask. The Takaran shrugs. It's not a matter of taste so much as it is a matter of species. Most of the folkish in the city are merchants, and rather old and unattractive. Not that there isn't something to be said about experience. There are some fine-looking young guards at the embassy, but they are so shy, he says, offering you a sly look. One thinks that they may even be afraid of me, or at least my reputation. You catch the ambassador's drift immediately, though some part of you cannot help but be a little shocked. What Lord Cassius does in his bedroom, or anyone else's, is none of your affair. But the frank manner in which he speaks of his amorous diversions is a bit much, especially in this setting. By the tree, he mutters with a shake of his head. If I stay here any longer, I fear I may even begin to find you humans attractive. That's all. Good evening, Lord Cassius. Wait, will you not have a drink first? Lord Cassius asked, already reaching for a second sniffer. Oh, of course. Why not? The Takaran ambassador quickly pours out another measure of Qunnaran brandy and hands it to you. Takara on Tozungai, he declares as he raises his glass. The battle cry of the Takaran Empire turned into a jaunty toast. Saints guard the king, you reply in kind. Good evening, Lord Cassius. As the two of you set your now empty glasses down, come by the embassy sometime. We ought to chat again, yes? With that, you turn back to the center of the hall. Who will you speak to next? Let's talk to Blaylock and Sandal. You find your former subordinates still deep in their own conversation. Sanderel is leaning against the polished wooden banister of the staircase, sipping idly from a glass of Canarian red as Blaylock recounts some exploit or another. Yet the instant they sense your approach, years of instinct kick in. Their limbs stiffen, and they snap to attention as you stand before them. Good evening, sir. The two of them chorus as if they were still your troop commanders. You were still their captain, and you were all still at war. The war is over, gentlemen. We're all equals now. Yes, sir, Sanderel replies, out of habit, catching himself an instant after the words leave his lips. I'm sorry, sir. It's not an easy habit to break, sir, Blaylock adds with a smirk. Besides, the war may be over, but we're not exactly equal. Are we, my lord? Sanderel nods in agreement. Indeed, congratulations are on your investiture, my lord. Correct or not, the unfamiliar style still grates upon your ears just a little. For half a decade, you were a simple sir to these men. Even if military rank had separated you by discipline, you were still all gentlemen officers of the blood. Now you're not only above them in the reckoning of the king's army, but in the whole of society for every breathing moment of your life. Strangely enough, your twinge of discomfort seems to only bring relief to your former subordinates. Perhaps Blaylock and Sanderel, seeing you as unfamiliar with your new status as they are, have been assured that you're the same man who led them into battle just a few months ago. Blaylock, at least, seems back to his old self, his old blunt self. So what exactly brings you to us, my lord, if I might be so bold? He asks. I think you've gotten tired of staring at our faces by now. I was hoping for some news from the regiment. Sanderel would know better than I, Blaylock admits. Would you believe that he set up a secret correspondence ring while we were all in Antar? He might as well be working for Royal Intelligence at this rate. It's hardly secret, Sanderel replies with a look of exasperation. I even asked if you wanted to join. I just thought it would be a means to keep in touch once we all went home, that's all. This reminds me, I need to remember that when it comes to a choice later on. I think this might affect something else, but we'll see how this goes out. And have you interject, kept in touch, I mean? Your former subordinate nods. Oh yes, of course. The regiment's been reduced to peacetime strength. The officers who haven't sold their commissions or gone on half pay like us are cooped up in Fernandad's court, watching their men grow fat and lazy. I can't say I envy them. Lord Reynard is still with the regiment, of course. He's supposed to be buying a promotion to major soon. I don't see much of a point to that, Blaylock comments sourly. He'll inherit the colonelcy when he succeeds his father as Duke of Canaris. Seems like a waste of money to me. I'm sure he has his reasons, Sanderel replies. As for the others, Captain Garrett somehow managed to keep his command. Hawkins has third squad now. Now that is an interesting fact. Third Squadron had been Kazarosta's command for much of the war. If his second in command is now in charge of his former unit, then what about Sir Caius, you ask? Any news of him? We were just talking about him, Blaylock replies. He's the regimental quartermaster now. He shakes his head grimly. Now there's a job I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Deathborn bastard or no, put a fighting officer in charge of supply carts and musket stands, and he'll like as not explode. Some men rather enjoy such tasks, Sanderel sniffs. Blaylock scoffs. Some men might, but Sir Caius de All Kazarosta, he'll blow out his brains of boredom by the end of the year. Saint Octavia is my witness. With one quick motion, he tosses back the remains of his glass. Anyway, enough of such grim talk. Shall we change the subject, sir? Yes, perhaps that would be best. I wanted to see some familiar faces. In truth, I've missed you. Blaylock seems about to say something, then Sanderel, but neither do. For a moment, the three of you stand in silence, sharing a truth you all seem to know, but none of you are really willing to voice. You know, sometimes I fear that part of me actually misses the war, Sandero finally admits. Not the death and the hardship, but how it brought us all together, united us under one purpose. Back then, when I was leading my troop through some snowstorm or burning one of my men, burning one of my men after a skirmish, I used to long for peace. But now, it did bring us together, didn't it? Blaylock replies after a moment. In Antar, all I needed to do to hear Sandero's terrible opinion on something was to ask. Now, I must send my valet halfway across the city, and even then, it's only a letter I get in reply. He shakes his head. All these years as a part of something greater, and now you feel like a stone cut away from its fence. Sandero suggests, something like that? Blaylock nods. Yes, something like that. I wish we could do this more often. In truth, as you listen to your former subordinates banter with each other, as they did in Antar, some part of you wishes you were back there too. Sandero is right. For all of its horror, the war gave you all purpose, a common cause, a brotherhood. If peace cannot sustain such noble sentiments, then perhaps you force yourself to stop. It will not do any good to keep thinking on this. What about the two of you? What about the two of you enjoying peacetime? To be frank, I find myself rather enamored of peace, Sandero replies. And Antar, you were always ready to move at an hour's notice, never knowing if you'd be resting that night in a warm bed, or under the stars, or atop a funeral pyre. I had forgotten what it was like to wake up each morning knowing how the next day, or week, or month, or year is to transpire. Frankly, I found its rediscovery marvelous. Marvelously boring, perhaps, Blaylock scoffs. Eat the same food, wake up to the same wallpaper, see the same Saints bedamned tree on the way to the same Saints bedamned coffee shop every afternoon. He shakes his head. You came back from Antar with just as much plunder money as I did. More, even. You ought to spend it on something more happy than the writings of a dusty old Kean scribblers who died without ever feeling the touch of a woman. I mean to, the other man replies touchedly. I shall enroll in the Royal University this coming year. The money I brought back from Antar will pay my tuition. Lilac makes a noise which is half amusement and disdain. The university? If that's the case, save your money and stick to your scribblers. I spent 2 years there, and all I learned was how to sleep efficiently in a lecture hall. Perhaps if you've done something other than sleep in your lectures, you would not have been expelled, Sanderel answers. Now it is Blaylock's turn to get defensive. I'll have you know I was a perfectly satisfactory student. It was my activities outside the lecture hall which the masters objected to. Putting holes in your fellow students, you mean? Sanderel snipes back, with just enough of a grin to turn an insulting remark into a jesting one. I suppose that I suppose the practice stood you in good stead in Antar. Blaylock grins wide. Then I suppose the university taught me something useful after all. If you'll excuse me, I think I ought to see what everyone else is up to. Of course, sir, Blaylock and Sanderel reply, much as they had when you were their captain, and they your lieutenants. Perhaps that won't ever really change. You head back to the center of the hall to find the music fading and a crowd already gathering around Lord Palisar, standing atop the first landing of the staircase, glass in hand. The sharp ring of metal on glass echoes across the chamber as the music fades away. The room falls silent. Those not already with their eyes on Lord Palisar quickly rectify their oversight. Gentlemen, thank you for coming here tonight, he begins, his affectations of speech falling away like a discarded overcoat. It is good to see you all here today, not only to recall the glory we have won and the great feats of arms we have accomplished, but also to remember the comrades we have lost and the sacrifices we have all made to return our kingdom to a happy state of peace. A murmur of approval rises from those around you, but Palisar is not finished. Now I must ask a question, he continues. What now? This time there are only a few uncertain murmurs. What now indeed? We return to our homeland to find it not as we remember, the Lancer resumes. a note of wistfulness creeping into his voice. We return to a way of doing things which we can barely understand, faces whom we can barely recognize, loved ones who do not understand what we have endured, who cannot see all that we have lived through as anything more than a bad memory to be put out of their seeing, as if we would have been better off not coming home at all. More murmurs now, more vehement ones. For them, at least, Palisar's words have touched a nerve. As you may well know, I was not long ago a member of the Renderware Club, the most fashionable in the city, Palisar's voice continues, cutting high and clear through the buzz of angry mutters. When I came back from Antar, I returned there, only to find myself surrounded by men who did not care about the war, men who had sat in soft chairs while we fought for our lives at Blogia, at Caringia, and at 100 half-remembered skirmishes. He shakes his head, sadly, slowly. They were supposed to be my brothers, but to them I was a curiosity. Young Palisar, who had gone to war. The voices of the crowd grow louder, tinged with a fresh sense of outrage. Judging by the looks of anger on some of their faces, Palisar is not the only one to have felt so. The Renderware Club did not want me, the Lancer continues. They were far too civil to say so, but I could see it well enough. The other clubs would be no better. To them, the man the war has made me would simply be an eccentric at best and an unwanted reminder at worst. At last I faced the truth, that there is no respectable place for a soldier in this city. Lord Palisar's eyes are ablaze now, his expression a heady cocktail of indignation and conviction. There is no respectable place for a soldier in this city, he repeats, so I've decided to make one. There's a moment of surprised silence as men look to each other in something akin to shock. All around, you can see faces tormented by a fresh crop of questions yet unasked. Palisar does not hesitate in offering answers. It is no secret that I did well out of the war, he continues, but only through the exertion and skill of my fellow Tierran soldiers could I have achieved such heights. It would only be fair that my good fortune be used for our mutual benefit. I mean to establish a formal club with premises nearby. There we may speak of the war without the judgment or curiosity of the ignorant. We may act collectively in the interest of the welfare of our fellow soldiers and work to impress some notion of our experiences upon the general public. Bane blood and service in Antar shall be the only requirement for membership. War has made us brothers. It would be shameful to allow peace to isolate us from men whom we have shed blood alongside. Our time away from home has turned it into a strange and unfamiliar country, but let us resolve to face it together. Hear, hear, someone shouts as a wave of applause breaks over the room. All around you, men show their approval. But what about you? I'm gonna believe in Palisar. Palisar's sentiment is noble, and I am sure his intentions are good. I approve. You applaud along with all the others. If things are truly as bad as Palisar seems to think they are, then a club dedicated to the veterans of the war in Antar is sorely needed. If the Lancer officers has the resources to back such an endeavor, then surely only good can come of it. The rest of the night passes in a haze of food and drink. You recall a rather good Calendrian risotto and a rather lively debate over the translation of a certain passage in A Treatise on Morality in Wartime. There is Canaran brandy, of course, and Kintari whiskey, and even bottles of the clear Antari potato wine which so many officers have acquired a taste for. The string quartet play up the old marching airs again, and this time they are joined by a chorus of voices, most no longer sober. And so the halls of that grand townhouse echo with the words of The March of the King's Chosen and The Powder Dance, songs last sung in the forest of Antar. If I'm not mistaken, I think the Treatise on Morality in Wartime is one of the excerpt or little story things that Paul Wang released as the game was being developed. I think you can actually look at it on his Patreon, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that was one of the ones. There have been several that have been released. Then, almost as soon as you seem to settle in, it's all over. The clock reads well past midnight, and only those without business in the morning linger on, supine upon the settees and armchairs of Lord Palisar's study, like the wounded in the aftermath of a battle. Though no surgeons and bane healers will be needed to treat their hurts, only time and coffee. You, on the other hand, have no time for such respite. Your head still pounding from drink and your uniform jacket reeking of tobacco ash. You take Lord Palisar's coach back to your temporary lodgings near St. Jerome's Square. It is hard going up the steps to the door of your lodging house. Drink and darkness make you unsteady as you carefully step around the slumbering rag swath heaps clustered around the entranceway. And in these days, in this part of the city, the homeless and the destitute seem everywhere. Entire families huddled against the niches and alleys like piles of refuse, desperate for the bare hope of some protection from the elements. They were there before the war, too, as far as you remember, but never in such number. You can only hope that they will find some more robust form of shelter before the weather turns. Tierran winters are nothing like the Antari variety, but even a mild frost can kill when one has neither food nor shelter. You open the front door. From the corner of your vision, you glimpse a pair of eyes wrapped in the shabby remains of what might have been a fine riding cloak. For an instant, you seem to see those fugitive orbs staring hungrily at the door which you have opened, the door to warmth, shelter, to the flickering light of the fire still blazing in the parlor beyond. You step inside and look back out into the cold, perhaps. No, but there is nothing now, only darkness. You shut the door behind you. Exhaustion begins to creep into your limbs as you climb the narrow staircase up to your temporary lodgings. Your feet laden lumps as you drag them up each step. Most of your luggage is already packed and waiting in your rooms, piled in neat stacks by the wall of the parlor. Moving only by sheer will, you check the bed to make sure that the maidservant laid down a spare suit of clothes, as you requested. You sit down on the bed next to them, taking only the time to pry off your boots, before collapsing onto the pillows, too tired to even pull the covers around you. Tomorrow is not so far away, and you best be rested by then. For tomorrow you will begin your long journey back to a place both strange and familiar. A place which can barely remember, a place which you can barely remember, a place whose memories run in your very blood. Tomorrow, you're going home. Now, as I said before, I am going to turn around and be staying in the capital. Since we've already covered this, I am going to skip ahead unless there have been any major changes. Well, actually, now that I think about it, I might just go ahead and go through it. I don't think there'll be any real major changes from what I remember. I do know in one of my playthroughs I did save the I think there was the prince or something like that. So there was some differences there. I think that happened in the first game. Again, I can't remember all the choices that I made, but if that's the case, you see that person in the village. So we'll see how that goes. But let me take a break real quick. I'll be right back. All right, I am back, and now we're actually into chapter 1 proper now, wherein the Lord of the Courts returns to the place of his birth and is reacquainted with the affairs of his noble house. So, I don't think I did anything different, but we shall see if there were any differences. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump into it. There will be some slight differences, of course, because I don't think I am as charming as I was in the demo. So yeah, we'll probably make some different choices as far as that goes, but we'll see. As you may have noticed, my lord, the roads remain in terrible condition. As if to prove the point, your family's rickety old coach chooses that moment to lurch violently from one side to the other. It's all you can do to keep your seat, but facing you, the cadaverous form of Ephraim Sandersley, your family's solicitor, does not seem to shift at all. Yet the roads are not what alarm me the most, the lawyer continues, without even pausing to regain his breath. As I'm sure your lordship is aware, times have never been easy here, but the war appears to have made them harder than ever. You're not alone, trying to keep your attention and your seat as the coach trundles along the uneven track. Sandersley greeted you when you landed at Crittenden Port, waiting with your coach to accompany you on the last leg of your trip to your estate. He had spent most of that trip in silence, leaving you alone with your thoughts. But now that you've finally entered within the boundaries of your own lands, he's been nothing if not verbose. Another 15 tenant families left last year. I do not think I can blame them, to be honest. Every year, the crown taxes seem to grow. Every year, more and more of our buyers in the big cities go bankrupt or are bought out by the Kian, who purchase only their own grain from their own country. You cannot blame him, you suppose. Sandersley was saddled with much of the work of maintaining the estate after your father's death. Now that you've returned, it has become his duty to educate you on the state of the very lands and people which you have so recently become lord and master of. In truth, he admits, those who remain mostly hold out hope that your lordship will be able to ameliorate matters. Now that you have returned, some will expect a great deal of you. I make no promises, but I will do what I can. I've seen that management system. It is different. Sandersley nods, the threadbare flicker of a grin on his thin, craggy features. I suppose that would be for the best, he observes. It is one thing to make plans, but is another to put them into action. Talk may easily achieve the former, but the latter requires money, a substance which appears to be in short supply everywhere. Rest assured, Sandersley, you reply, His Majesty's government has been most appreciative of my services. The war is over, my lord, the solicitor replies bluntly. There will be no more ransoms to be had, and you've still your debts to think about. You're past the fields now. Beyond the battered and cracked coach window, you can see the cottages of Roomberg village, constructions of slate walls and tall, narrow windows like the images that still sit deep within the recess of your memories, the images that the word home had conjured within you during your long years in Antar. Yet the scenes which confront you now seem different from what you remember. The figures who trudge from cottage to cottage seem duller and more stunted than the stout, happy folk you recall. Everything seems smaller, dirtier, tawdrier. Even the air seems to hang into your nostrils, heavy and foetid. You cannot help but get the impression that this is not your home. Everything is off. Everything is wrong. Even as your eyes register the dilapidated old village shrine and the battered market stalls on the village square and the remaining links of orange bunting from the just past High Harvest Festival, you cannot shake the unease in the back of your head. The more familiar your surroundings become, the more alien you seem to feel. And what of your family? Will your lady mother still be the warm, loving figure you remember? Will your brother and sister be as cold as they have been in their letters? The village is far behind you now, its last cottages receding into the distance. Ahead, there are only the long, lonely path up the rise to the manor house where you lived for so many of your early years. Even from a distance, it too is somewhat less than you remembered it. The gray stone of the walls barely held together by the evidence of slapdash and desperate repairs. The eaves sagging under the weight of a roof which seemed in dire need of replacement. The home of your childhood had been reduced to a sad little edifice, a rickety pile atop its hill, half its windows broken or blocked up, its perimeter fence tumbled down and entirely collapsed at places, the grounds almost overrun with wild tangles of growth and shrubbery. There can be no safety in a frail half-ruined ruin like this. It would be so easy for a band of determined attackers to advance under cover of the brush up to the very perimeter fence. From there, it would be child's play for any band of assailants to find and advance through one of the gaps in the fence, to enter through one of the broken windows and place the entire house at their mercy. Even if you were able to shut yourself up in some secure wing, you doubt it would take any piece of artillery greater than a 6-pounder to batter the whole edifice down within an hour, with you still inside. It is only then that you realize that you have, through long force of habit, begun thinking like a soldier again. Only through a conscious effort do you force yourself to stop? The war is over. There are no partisans skulking about in the woods around the Roomberg house, looking to do you harm. You may have enemies in Tierra, true, but nobody so barbarous as to attack you with a cannon. Surely to apply military patterns of thought to your life at peace would be ridiculous, wouldn't it? Well, since I've already been through this, the lessons of war have made me stronger. I'm not abandoning them. True, you're no longer at war. True, you no longer serve as a king's officer on the active list, and you no longer command a squadron of dragoons. But that doesn't mean the ways of thinking and doing which you acquired during your time at war cannot be bent to other purposes. Your time in the king's army taught you more than how to set up pickets and form a skirmish line. It taught you how to discipline your thoughts, how to make decisions quickly and without recrimination, how to give orders, take them, and to keep your wits about you even in times of utmost stress and danger. No doubt, your father tried his best to manage the estate as best he could in his own way, but he didn't have the focus or the willfulness which your years as a king's officer brought you. Armed with such tools, you should be certain to surpass him. Oh boy, I don't know about that. Got the achievement Homecoming. The coach trundles on past the rusted wrought iron gates and up the paved drive to where a row of figures await, turned out to receive the new lord of the manor. They're all here, the half-dozen men and women who had served your father and are now to serve you. They're smaller and grayer than you remember, their clothes more worn and threadbare, but one by one, the sight of their faces pulls a name from the deep recesses of your memory. Fernand, the foul-mouthed old groundskeeper. Mistress Ibanez? Sure, who'd run the kitchen as her own personal round. Armand, the footman who had once played constable and roadsman with Willie Fenton in that very same yard, and who was also on Attack on Titan. You remember them all. You remember them, all of them. And they're not the only ones waiting for you in the battered yard. Your lady mother is there too, her eyes wide and searching, her body tense like a coiled spring. Stoop-backed old Mistress Fenton is standing beside her. Luisa and Carlos were still children when you went to war. Now your younger siblings stand tall and proud beside your mother, transformed into a man and woman fully grown. You had sent word ahead, of course. Perhaps you were never truly cut off from them. You exchanged letters regularly whilst you were in Antar. But letters aren't the same as seeing and hearing and breathing the same air. At last the coach lurches to a stop on the uneven cobbles. Thumps echo across the ceiling as the coachman makes his way down to the side of the carriage, and then his black-gloved hand pulls open the door. With a deep breath, you step out onto the drive, back into the world you left so many years ago. Mother, you report as you step down off the running board. I've returned. For a moment, your mother only nods sedately in reply. Even from here, you can see the joy in her eyes, but her expression is a mask of reserve, held fast by her sense of decorum. It doesn't hold her for long. The bond slips slowly at first. She edges forward as if falling. Then she's stepping forward with increasing urgency until she casts aside all pretense as she closes the distance betwixt you in the barest space of an instant. My boy, my dear boy, she cries as she flings her arms around you and pulls you in for a ferocious hug. You're safe and you're alive, she exclaims, all but blubbering through the wet trails running down her cheeks. She squeezes you tight, and you squeeze her back. There are times and places for reserve and for calm. This isn't one of them. Your siblings are somewhat less demonstrative. They say their welcomes, your brother bows, your sister curtsies. You suppose they must be happy to have you back, at some measure, but you suppose you cannot blame them too much for their distance. Mother had always loved you best, and to be reminded of such a thing even at this late juncture cannot be comfortable for either of them. Only the servants are left now, the coachman and Sandersley among them. You can see the unease and uncertainty in their expressions as they deliver their bows and curtsies. True, you were the young master to them when you were a boy, but boyhood seems far away now, and the gulf of years that separates you has become a wide and bottomless chasm. While they spent those years in this quiet and rural backwater, you fought on the forefront of the largest and bloodiest war in the Unified Kingdom's history. Could they even could they even think to fathom the trials you have faced? What stories have they heard of the war in Antar? Of you? Perhaps it's time for some words or a gesture. Anything to lay their uncertainties to rest. Hmm. Well, I'm not gonna try to inspire them. That's probably not gonna work out too well. I must reassure them that things will not be much different. I don't think they want to hear that either. Words are cheap. I'll offer it. Nah, not gonna give them a substantial bonus. I can't afford it. If I'm to reassure them, it will be by deeds, not words. Indeed, best keep this brief then. You step forward and clear your throat. Good afternoon. You all know who I am, and I know who you all are. So I'll not waste any time with introductions. Back to work. You can see at least one or two of the staff furrowing their brows in confusion. This was evidently not the speech they were expecting. However, their sense of amusement is certainly not strong enough to master their sense of duty. You've made the situation clear enough to them. You are the new lord now. Your orders are the ones that must be followed, and your orders are to go back to work. So back to work they go. Dinner is almost a feast. There's a salad of marsh samphire and a plate of salt crabs, their shells cracked open to expose the steaming, succulent meat within. There's smoked herring on a bed of seaweed and pitchers of oyster stout. No Atoria City hostess would have been caught dead serving such fare. No regimental mess either. It has too much of the air of the backwoods rustic and lacks any of the sophistication of Kian or Takaran or Yossi cooking, with ingredients determined less by any culinary theory or high fashion than by price and sheer proximity to the kitchen which is to prepare it. You can imagine the polite condescension of some of your higher place acquaintances if they were served such food. Others of their class would likely be far less civil. Food for peasants, they would likely sneer, and people who live like peasants. But for you, it is the food of your childhood, and even if the rest of your past before the war seems dull and foggy and only half recalled, you remember this more than well enough. It is the taste of home, and you spoon it up with gusto. Your mother watches you dine with silent indulgence at first, seemingly happy just to have you at her table again, even though circumstances have technically made it your table. She waits patiently as you go through your first portions with ferocious speed. Only once you've begun to pace yourself does she address you. Darren, she begins, isn't it about time you begun thinking of marriage? Your fork pauses halfway from your lips to the table. You try your hardest not to perform an involuntary impression of a man suddenly struck on the forehead with a club. Marriage, mother? She nods decisively. Yes, dear, marriage. That thing people do to conceive an heir. Well, technically, that's not the thing people do to conceive an heir, but I digress. I suppose we shall need to find you a wife, and quickly too. You're not getting any younger, and were it not for the war, you would have no doubt already found a lady of the appropriate disposition and standing, and sired 2 or 3 heirs by her. She pauses for a moment, finger to her lips in thought. If I recall correctly, your father was trying to get you set up with the Bunavera girl down the road when the war started. Whatever became of that? Yes, you remember that, though only barely. Your father had been rather set on helping you find a respectable match, especially seeing as the son of a poor baron was not exactly the most glittering of prospects for any Bane-blooded lady of tilted family. The fact that one lived only a few hours' ride away had rather been a stroke of luck, and negotiations had entered a most crucial phase, just as the war interrupted. In the end, I'm going to say the talks came to nothing. There was no engagement. There were negotiations, you admit, but nothing came of them. Oh, what a pity, your mother tuts. She seemed like such a charming girl, and her father worth 1,400 a year. It only, if only your father had let me help smooth things out. No doubt she's been snapped up by some overdressed city cad and spends her days thinking of what she could have had instead. Mother, your sister tries to interject, is this really appropriate? Your mother carries on. Some part of you even wonders if she even remembered that the two of you are not alone. Well, in any case, the past is the past. Here you are, still unwed. We must find you some new prospects and quickly. I trust you do not disagree. I do not know. Give me time. I think I just messed up too, if I'm not mistaken. Because I think in the other save that I had, I was talking to Eleonora, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't think I see an option for that here. Because I think it was on this particular part. Coinky dink. I do not know. Give me time. Your mother's rebuke is almost halfway out of her lips by the time she's able to stop it. For a moment, the words hang in the air, unspoken. Then she lets out a long, patient sigh and nods. It is long past the time when a mother can be justified in dictating terms to her son, she says with a note of firmness and addressing herself as much as you. This is your decision to make, not mine. You nod, resisting the urge to let out your own sigh of relief. In truth, you do not know if she would understand. The fact that she does, there is only one thing I would ask of you. Whatever decision you are to come to it quickly. With so many other officers returning from the war unwed, it shall soon be difficult to find you an appropriate match. There is truth in that. If you do not mean to get married, it is best you commit to that course before the sitting rooms and gardens of any potential prospects are already swarmed with men who, like yourself, have spent their years winning fame and fortune overseas rather than seeking out a wife. You nod readily. I understand, Mother. Rest assured, I do not mean to waste any time. Good. Then we may put an end to such heavy talk, your mother replies brightly. Shall we have some dessert? Yeah, I think I might have messed up there. Huh. Because I thought I had pretty much the same choices for all my saves, even the modded ones or whatnot, but I guess I didn't? I wonder if that means I was talking to, well, that I couldn't have been. Because I was thinking for a second I could have been talking to, what's her face? The Royal Intelligence lady. Not Eleanor, but her friend. But I don't think I can do that on this type of playthrough because I'm more the noble character in this particular playthrough. Whereas I think if you're on the other playthrough, it's a little different. So you don't really, you can actually be, you can actually romance her. I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure, but you do have more interactions with her, and I think you can talk to her more, and so on and so forth. So I may have made a mistake. This almost makes me want to go back and redo that, so I can just go ahead and marry the girl who's back home or whatnot. I'm kind of curious on how that would play out too, because I think the interaction happens before you go back to the capital. So that would be kind of interesting. The next few days pass in a flurry of activity as you grow accustomed to your new position and circumstances. When you were in Antar, the process of settling into your new billet only took a few hours. Your Batman would follow you on your new lodgings with your baggage and unpack everything as per your well-accustomed directions. You would immediately commandeer a desk for the purpose of your administrative work. After that, it was only a matter of clearing away the papers left by the desk's previous owner, introducing yourself at the local officers club, and making sure the rest of your command was similarly settled in. You took that for granted then. Now, nearly returned to your childhood home, you find yourself surrounded by half a dozen servants who remember your name and face. but know nothing of your personal habits. Your baggage, the sparse kit of a soldier ready to depart at a moment's notice, possesses little of the necessities you suddenly find yourself in need of as a country gentleman. Worst of all, instead of having the luxury of discarding your father's confidential papers, the ones which even Sandersley is not privy to, you must read through them one by one at the desk which used to be his, so that you may learn of your father's affairs and the decisions he made in government of the barony which is now yours. It is not an easy process. Even in his private notes, your father wrote of you often, and to you as well. It is almost a palpable blow to the heart every time you come across some note or memorandum headed with the words, "For Darren," to be brought to his notice upon his succession, written in his hand. Your mother does her best to help, offering advice when she has some insight, and support when she does not. Perhaps more importantly, she keeps the house running, as she has always done, leaving you to focus on your father's notes. It is only after 3 days of near constant work that you finally emerge from your father's study, your head still filled with the list of tenants, maps of grazing fields, and the text of legal contracts. You commit yourself to a good long night's sleep. You're not entirely versed in your estate's workings, but you at least now know enough to be confident in moving forward. You've taken the first step to becoming Baron Roomberg in truth, as well as in name. On the morning of the fourth day, you bathe and dress in your best coat. You order the carriage hitched and readied, and head for Baron Bunevera's estate. Courtesy requires you to introduce yourself to your nearest neighbor as the new Baron, even though he may have no reason to remember you fondly after your father's failed attempt to arrange a marital alliance. You can only hope that the past has not prejudiced him too greatly against your house, and pray that the conversation does not become too awkward. Ah, so maybe I still have a chance? Bunavera House is not so different from your own residence. The drive is perhaps less holed, the walls in less disrepair, the outbuildings in better condition, but as a whole, it is of the same model as your house and perhaps 100 other houses, one other country houses which dot the salt coast, too worn and too cramped to be the stately hall of a great lord, far too grand and ancient to be the home of a mere farmer or tradesman. Lord Benevera is a solidly built man, his gray hair tied back and curled as he had been the fashion among as had been the fashion among the country nobility when your father was young. You think he would have made a good dragoon officer were he 20 years younger. Over cups of coffee and plates of biscuits, the two of you make inconsequential conversation in his parlor for the next hour. You take care to avoid any serious conversation, to steer clear of any topic which might cause offense or unpleasantness. Instead, you chat about the weather, the ongoing harvest, the local news. You lament the poor state of your roads. He not quite boasts about his efforts to restore his village's shrine. It is an amiable exchange. It's if almost entirely without substance. The chatter of two country gentlemen discussing matters which would be utterly irrelevant to anyone who lived a day's ride away. Part of you cannot help but enjoy the process of conversation without consequence after 12 years of almost nothing but the earnest discussion of war and statecraft. Part of you is slowly going mad. Thus, it is both a sadness and a relief when your third cup of coffee, Lord Benevera brings a third figure into the room. A slight, snub-nosed young woman with long, mousy brown hair and a pair of darting hazel eyes. "My Lord Roomberg," he says as the girl steps forward to join you. "It has been some time, but I'm sure you remember my daughter." You remember Lady Julia de All Benevera only faintly, and judging by the way in which she moves around you, there's little doubt that she doesn't remember much of you either. The two of you exchange maybe half a dozen words altogether before she withdraws to the other side of the parlor, taking a seat next to her father. Baron Benevera continues your conversation from before. He at times defers to his daughter, though only long enough to allow a few words delivered with a quiet, almost meek reserve. You suppose that's only natural. Women of your class are not exactly encouraged to speak their minds when in the company of men by their husband or father. You wonder if she would behave the same way outside the shadow of her father's influence, but you cannot know that unless you were able to speak with her in a more intimate setting, and that could not possibly occur unless you were trying to court her. Then again, perhaps. No, now is not the time for such thoughts. The coffee pot is empty, and the biscuits are gone. Your visit, for all intents and purposes, is at an end. Lady Julia escorts you to the door. Her father thanks you for a pleasant morning's conversation and sends you on your way. You spend the trip back to your estate thinking on what could have been, and perhaps what might be. Huh. So, yeah. I guess I could possibly still do that? But I'm also guessing that that could possibly only happen if I stayed home, perhaps? Not sure. Possibly. Yeah. I have some second thoughts about that. I might actually go back and replay that so I can just go ahead and marry her. But yeah, we'll see how that goes perhaps in the next video. And actually, this video is going a little bit long. So I think I'll end this here for right now. And I'll come back to this incident. I'll start back in the next video with me talking to her father, and then we'll proceed down the marriage path. And I will basically get hitched with her, and we will go from there. So if you like the video, like the video. If you want to see more content like this, subscribe. I have a lot of things on the channel, and I will have many other things in the future. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to leave it in the comment section, and I will get to it as soon as I can. I will definitely finish this. Like I said, I'm not sure how much I'll get into this because we have covered a lot of this, even though there are some slight differences. I think the only real major difference is whether or not I save the prince. If I save the prince, then you'll see that interaction here and now. But if I didn't, then nothing of note will actually happen. So then I'll just skip ahead to me being back in the capital, and that be the end of things, because there won't be any real major incidents going on besides what we've already encountered. So there's that. And also, yeah, if you have any, if there are any concerns about as far as music or anything like that you would like for me to have playing in the background, please let me know. I think right now I just have some chill music playing in the background that is copyright free, of course. But if you would like something more closer to this, or maybe just any other type of music, please feel free to let me know in the comment section, and I will definitely adjust to that. Other than that, yeah, I'll be going ahead and trying to finish Lords of Infinity as well, so I will cover more ground. And these videos will be much longer than my typical videos. I try to keep it around an hour, but I think with Lords of Infinity, it's long. It's really long, really wordy. If I'm not mistaken, I think this game is well over 1 million words. So I'm definitely going to try and make these videos as long as possible. I'm looking at maybe 1 hour and 45. I'm trying not to do 2 hours, but we'll see how it goes. But yeah, if you want longer videos, let me know. If not, I can just record longer videos and then just cut them up into shorter videos to have. Either way, just let me know. And also, if there are other choice of games you would like for me to play, then definitely let me know about that. There are a lot I have not played, and there are some that I've played, but I haven't played in a long time. I think the last game that I actually played, as far as choice of games go recently, was Fallen Hero Retribution. I played the hell out of that game. I've played it several times now, and but before that, I think the last time I played a choice of game was, like, according to one of my saves, was like 2018. So I haven't really been playing a lot of choice of games. I think I tried playing the Samurai of Hyuga game, and I couldn't really get into it. But yeah, I haven't really been playing a lot of choice of games. I know one that's been recommended here recently is Wayhaven Chronicles. That actually came up recently as something that someone would like for me to play. As far as whether or not I would actually play it, it's a pretty decent game. I mean, I liked it. I played the first one. I would definitely be interested in playing the second one, especially now that I see that the third one is supposed to come out, I think, April 23rd. So that might be interesting to play on the channels. But if there are any other ones you have, or that anyone would like for me to play, by all means, leave it in the comment section. There are also some ones that I need to check with the creators to see if they will let me play. There's one game that I've really enjoyed playing here recently that's in the works. I'm not sure when it's going to be released, but it's a political game where you play as the president of the United States. It's called The People's House, and I have really enjoyed that playthrough because it's it's actually more of I won't say serious, but it's more of a serious playthrough as president of the United States than some games that I've played. There was one I think that had came out, and you know, I didn't too much care for how a lot of the things were structured in that particular playthrough. I wanted something a little bit more serious as president of the United States, and that one was more humor than serious. I don't really know what happened with that one, but it just kind of faded off into the existence. And then of course there was the other game that was political. I think it was United We Stand or Divided We Fall. I can't remember which one it was, but it got canceled. I think the demo again is still up, but I really enjoyed that one too. So yeah, like I said, there's plenty of choice of games and other and hosted games and stuff that have come out that I could definitely play. But just let me know what the feeling is. And I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and get a poll going for the ones that I see pop up the most, and then I'll put that in a actual. Well, I'll see what choices comes up the most. I'll put that in the poll, and then we will go from there. And then that'll be the series that I cover next. There are some other games that I do want to check out too. In the meantime, I know King's Dilemma was something that came out a while back. I even got a key for it, and I know that's something that people have requested quite a bit. So I wanted to check that out. Wandering Sword was something that I was supposed to play. I think I missed the demo though. That I just got tied up with work and other things, so I didn't get a chance to actually play it on the channel. If it is still up, I'll play it, but I might have missed that. But yeah, if there's any other games, let me know. Anywho, I will end it there. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. See you.